Bruce Wolf, Dan Prof, coming up at 7:50. Ted Cruz invites Harry Reid to get out of his Ritz-Carlton digs in Washington, D.C. and visit the border. We are joined in studio right now by a man who got out of his digs in Tennessee just to come to
just
see
to be
us
with
today.
you.
Brad Thor, author of Act of War. It's debuted. It's #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Brad, good to have you here. And I thought we'd turn the discussion a little lofty right now.
Right.
There was an experiment conducted. I don't like to think of Germans with experiments and everything like this, but this sounds actually pretty good. What they did was to Germans collecting their passports or ID cards in the citizen centers of Berlin, they did an experiment where they had them do tasks, abstract tasks, and they found that Germans with an East German background tended to cheat more on the tests than Germans with a West German background.
Nothing.
And the conclusions one could easily draw from that, or infer from the study, is that you live in a socialist economy, you learn how to get along.
System.
Yeah, totally. And that's
game
what it
the
comes
system.
down to. But you'd normally think, socialism is going to end all the cheating and the greedy capitalism and the envy and things like that.
Well, socialism, every place it's been tried, has failed. And the reason it has failed, if you ask diehard socialists, is because of the United States. You cannot keep people in a crummy existence and have them see the United States and not pine for something better. So when you talk to hardcore socialists, they will tell you that the biggest impediment towards global socialism is the United States. And I firmly believe that the end game of the Democrat Party, as constituted now by the hard left, the end game is socialism. That's what they want. And only the people who are fighting for limited government are the only ones that are standing in the way of socialism taking hold around the world. Show me any country outside the United States, besides Israel, that doesn't have some form of socialism firmly rooted in their government.
Well, we had Larry Kudlow on the show last week. And,
love Larry.
We talked about this study the survey that Reason Magazine did of millennials, which found, among other things, that by a factor of about 3 to 1, millennials prefer socialism to capitalism, even though they don't know what either one of those terms means. And so I asked Larry if he had one piece of economic wisdom to impart on millennials, what would it be? And he kind of talked about what you said, how socialism has failed everywhere it's been tried, the Soviet Union, even China's adopting kind of a corporatist capitalist model despite the communist facade. And I would suggest, and I think this study about East versus West Germans highlights this, one nugget to impart: people respond to incentives. And so if you have a culture that is a kleptocratic culture, like a socialist culture like East Berlin, and people, as Bruce said,
Springfield,
it's the same thing here,
yeah.
Right? It becomes who you know and how you game the system, not what you produce, a service you provide. It's not about competition. It's about accessing clout.
And what did Margaret Thatcher say? Socialism is all fun until you run out of other people's money. It's like racism. I say that about racism too, that racism is all fun and games for our friends on the other side of the aisle, but eventually they run out of other people's patience. So this idea, millennials are morons. There really should be, for the most part, not all of them. There's some smart, informed ones, but for the most part, they felt for the hope and change thing. I mean, they really voted for president.
So did baby boomers, by the way.
Well,
so
a lot of white guilt. Yeah, a lot of white guilt rolled up in that. Absolutely, and there really should be not a literacy test, but a political literacy test before you can vote. In fact, in this country, if you don't know who the vice president is, shouldn't be allowed to get into the voting booth. I really believe that. And the one thing I think that would fix this country...
Agnew.
Right. One thing that fixed the country in a heartbeat, everybody gets one vote. But if you're paying into the system, if you're paying taxes, you ought to get a second vote. So there's no barrier to entry. Anybody can get the second vote.
Let's scram right now.
Brad Thor,
pretty soon there's going to be a poll tax, according to Brad.
Literacy test, and only landowners get a premium in their vote.
And how about them women folk, Brad? Did they vote like they're in Tennessee?
No barrier to entry. Everybody can have a second vote. You pay into the system because we're being overwhelmed by people who are only taking out. Well, if you're dead, you get to vote multiple times, but that's a Chicago special.
I'd like to start a conversation right now
I want to have
that
a conversation
will continue after the break as well, and that is, since now we know that socialism can't make you happy, as we thought it was, but the workers' paradise apparently is a dystopia, There, we do know how to achieve happiness. A recommended article from Dan Proft over the weekend from Arthur Brooks. You familiar with Arthur Brooks?
Yeah, you betcha.
Yeah, right
Great
there.
piece.
So he usually writes about happiness, and he writes about how
Yep.
lottery winners aren't happy because they didn't earn it,
Right.
and they all commit suicide in a way.
So the,
All right,
the question that Brooks
yeah,
puts in this piece: do we love people and use things, or do we love things and use people? And
Yeah.
he develops that choosing one course versus the other has very different implications.
And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make.
That's what I tell John
According-
Dempsey
Yeah.
all the time. By the way, JD,
Yeah.
you're looking good today. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
He's not even listening to me. Look at him.
Well,
He's in there preparing the news.
We'll talk about that at 7:49.